Hi, welcome to another edition of Capital Preview, a show brought to you by Mediacom, where we discuss important issues of the state of Iowa with our state representatives and state senators. Our guest this morning on Capital Preview is Senator Charles Schneider, Republican from West Des Moines. Senator, glad to see you this morning.
Good to see you too, Bill. Thanks for having me on again.
Well, thanks for coming in. I know that we are kind of in the waning hours of the state or the General Assembly's legislative session this year. Mm-hmm. And so I know that you're trying to get some things wrapped up. So I'm just going to kind of jump in to explain what the process is that determines the adjournment of the General Assembly.
Yeah, that's a question a lot of people have. And it's really, there's nothing in state law that says we have to adjourn by a certain date, but there's an incentive built into Iowa law to get us to adjourn by a certain date. So every General Assembly has 2 years. The first year of a General Assembly is typically 110 days, and that's based on the per diem reimbursement that legislators get. So the first year of a General Assembly, legislators are reimbursed for the first 110 days of that year. The second year of a General Assembly, legislators are reimbursed for the first 100 days. The 100th day this year was April 19th, so that was kind of the target date to get done, because otherwise legislators are paying for rent and other expenses out of their own pocket. So
Right.
It's usually a good incentive to get out of the Capitol.
Right. So why do they do that? So a session is really 2 years then?
A General Assembly.
A General Assembly.
Yeah, and
right.
there are 2 sessions per General Assembly.
Got it. Okay. So Senator, what's involved in getting a budget passed? Most people think there's one big budget and you pass the whole big budget all at once. So
yeah, and that's what I thought too before I looked into it. When I was running for this office in the first place, there are actually several different budget bills, and there are actually 7 budget subcommittees that usually meet jointly with House and Senate members in the beginning part of the legislative session. At these meetings, the different departments that are funded by that budget subcommittee will usually give presentations about their budget proposal that they gave to the governor and what they're proposing for us and whether they're asking for more or less than what the governor has recommended to us for the budget. So we have several of those meetings during the first half or so of the legislative session. Mm-hmm. And usually after the second final deadline, the budget subcommittees will propose a budget. Sometimes the House and Senate propose the same budget to their chambers. Sometimes they differ on what the budget will be.
So you're talking about the whole budget then?
No, each of the different budget bills.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So each of these budget subcommittees will put forth its own budget bill.
So do you guys get together and pass an entire budget then, or do you just pass all the parts?
We pass all the parts.
Okay.
But usually leadership in the House and the Senate agree on what the total amount will be before we pass the individual budget bills. Once they agree on that total amount, they parse that out among the different budget subcommittees, who then determine how they will allocate that amount in their individual budgets.
So are there sticking points then, right now, before this session ends, on budget items?
Yeah, there are a few.
Yeah.
And
Why
that
don't
will
you explain that to
Sure.
us?
It'll delay adjournment it already has, and
Yeah.
hopefully we'll wrap up this week, but I don't know. But one of the sticking points is Medicaid oversight. The House and Senate have proposed different oversight mechanisms for the new managed care system that we're moving to. So those need to be resolved. The transportation budget is another sticking point. The Senate Democrats have recommended $9 million more in spending than the House has. They also don't want the DOT to build to lease a driver's license station in Dallas County, which is one of the fastest, actually the fastest growing area in the state. And it's not uncommon for the DOT to lease a DOT-operated facility once a population gets to a certain size. They already have 19 DOT-operated stations throughout the state. But Senate Democrats don't seem to want to let the DOT do that. So that needs to get resolved. There are differences in the infrastructure bill. There's an amount of money that Senate Democrats have allocated toward putting furniture and some new courthouse space that Polk County has leased. They also want a bond for improvements to the State Historical Building, an office building, and the Law Enforcement Center. There's some differences in the standings bill as well. So those issues will need to get resolved.
Standing bills, I don't think a lot of people know what a standing bill is. I mean, they know that bills that come out of the committees, that have a home from those committees, but I think it's kind of interesting, I think, what standing bills are. So if you kind of explain.
Sure,
Yeah.
And I didn't know that either until I was running for the office. A standing appropriation is an appropriation that is set forth in state code, meaning it stands every budget year, unless the legislature notwithstands that particular section of the code to either increase or decrease funding for it. So that's really all it means.
Okay. Do they hook other legislation onto a standing bill?
Yeah, a lot of times they do. They call it a Christmas tree bill,
right,
because
or an omnibus.
Yeah. There are a lot of different additional spending provisions that can get tacked onto the standings bill, and different policy provisions as well.
Senator, Iowa's tax climate has been a big issue for you. Did the legislature do anything this year to improve that?
Unfortunately, no. The reason I think it's an issue is that there's a group called the Tax Foundation that ranks states in terms of business tax competitiveness every year. This year they ranked Iowa 40th. And there's IRS and census data that show that states that rank poorly in this particular measure or ranking lose population and wealth to other states. That suggests that business tax climate is a factor for people in deciding where they want to live and move, and for businesses in terms of where they want to locate.
Sure.
Now, it's one of just several factors. I mean, there are some factors that we simply can't control.
Right.
We can't move oceans or mountains here, for example. We can't make sure that we have pleasant weather year-round. But business tax climate is a factor that we do control.
Yeah.
And for that reason, it's even more important for us to make sure we have a good one and one that's competitive.
Yeah. You serve on the public retirement system, which meant a couple months ago, the last time you were talking about how they had underfunded the pensions. Was there anything done this year? Because I know this is an important deal, especially in one of the cities that you represent.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Two of the biggest pension systems that we have are IPERS and what's called the 411 system. IPERS is 84% funded, I believe, 86 or 84% funded, and it has a $5.45 billion unfunded liability. The 411 system is 81% funded and has a $530 million unfunded liability. That 411 pension system isn't used everywhere, but West Des Moines is a member of it, for example. Clive is as well. And not much was done, unfortunately, to address those systems. Representative Don Pettengill from the House is co-chair of the Pension Review Committee, and to her credit, she did bring in a couple of different outside organizations to help us understand pensions better, to know what questions to ask as policymakers, and also to let us know what's going on in other states and how other states have addressed similar issues that we have. There's not one solution that'll fit every situation, but we can learn from what other states have done and apply them to our own system to make sure that public employees have a secure retirement and to make sure that the system we have is fair not only to them but to taxpayers as well.
And kudos to her, because these are complicated issues, and no senator or House member should be expected to know all there is to know about these really tough issues.
Yeah.
So when you can bring experts in to kind of help.
Yeah, I was really disappointed that none of the Senate Democrats on the committee attended either of those meetings. We need everyone to come to the table to work on this. House Democrats were there, to their credit, and House Republicans and Senate Republicans were there too. But it's an issue that requires all of us to work together to get something done.
Absolutely. There are a few hot topics that are happening this year that are still unresolved, and I'm just going to kind of go through a couple of them with you.
Sure.
Water quality has went since I'm in an elected office as well, and in my conscious of working with the public, I don't remember seeing an issue that has went to the level that this has in a very short time. So, and that's water quality.
Yeah, and the House and Senate have come up with different proposals. Well, the House has a proposal. I don't believe Senate Democrats have come up with one yet. They've talked about different ideas, and I know there was a bill that I think would have implemented the 3/8 sales tax to fund water quality issues, but that didn't get out of committee, so it stalled. But the House proposal is still alive, and it uses existing tax revenue streams to help fund water quality issues. If nothing gets done this year, I hope that we've at least laid the groundwork for getting something done next year.
Oh, and I think you are, and I'm certainly no expert, but I think sometimes these complicated issues take a couple, 3 years. I'm sure you'd agree with that. You know,
Yeah, I
some
do.
were up there for long periods of years before they ever get resolved. So
Yeah, and we need to be smart about how we're using money for water quality issues as well. There are certain areas that produce more of these phosphates or nitrates that get into the system than others, so they would require probably more spending than others. And there are also certain methods to reduce phosphates and nitrates that work better than others, and we ought to apply the bulk of funding to those solutions that work well too.
the other one is the medical cannabis bill. That seems have taken on a life of its own. It's really complicated. I mean, it's extremely complicated, and it has so many different impacts, rather than just to pass a bill saying we'll grow the, medical cannabis here in the state of Iowa, but there's so many other repercussions that happen as a result of that. So why don't you give me a little bit of your thoughts on the medical cannabis bill and where it's at and what's going to happen to it?
Oh, there's one in the House right now that some House members believe they can get out of the House, but they might need to use a procedural maneuver to do that. And if they send it over to the Senate, then I don't know what the Senate will do with it. I imagine I'll be supportive of whatever comes out of the House. But if changes are made to it in the Senate, beyond what the House is willing to agree to, that might kill the bill. So I think we need to be judicious about this. It is a complicated issue, like you said, and no matter what we do at the state level, it's still going to be illegal at the federal level.
Senator, I got real quickly, I understand in talking to you a little bit before our show started that the Uber bill had passed. I think that's great. I think it's great for our metro area.
Yeah, me too.
It's a great company. And the concept is really good. And like you said, everybody kind of rises to the top with that.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing for Iowa. It's by rising to the top. What we were talking about before we got on the air is how it's actually forced the cab companies to be more competitive. They have an app now, where they didn't used to have an app.
Yep.
A lot of people use it. I know a lot of young professionals who use it just in town to go out with friends.
Right.
Hopefully that's reducing the number of people who are drinking and driving. And I think it's going to be great for rural Iowa too, where public transportation and cab companies just aren't even available.
And even our metro area, even though we are a metro area, I mean, it takes a while to get out to some of these suburbs of Des Moines. So, so good for you. Well, thank you this morning for being with us, Senator. I appreciate it.
Thanks for
Appreciate
having
your
me
work
on.
up there. Stay tuned for another edition of Capitol Preview.